We are back. Legendary Sickos, a legendary upside, and Spike Week collaboration after a brief hiatus. We are back today to talk about stacking. Myself, Erik Beinfor, and Pat Carrain, winner of Best Ball Mania 3 and creator of Legendary Upside, are going to dive into all the nooks and crannies of stacking. How do you implement your stacks in your drafts? What's an appropriate way to put together different stacks and maybe a little bit of galaxy brain and how we can take down these tournaments with our stacking? Let's do it.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
All right, Pat, we're back. The people were not very happy with me for the last couple of weeks, and I will take ownership over the fact that we had a little brief hiatus here with this show. Some scheduling conflicts. Sometimes the real life does get in the way, even when you work from home, creating fantasy football content for a living. But I am excited to get back. And today we are going to talk a little bit of stacking. We've obviously talked quite a few kind of gal brain type of conversations, obviously week 17, and how we can do some different things to try to take down these tournaments from a correlation perspective. But we haven't really dug into the actual stack, right? Like if I want to stack the Eagles, or I want to stack the Chiefs, or just general stacking, like, do I include running backs? What do I do with quarterbacks and tight ends? Can I just stack a quarterback with a tight end? Do I need a wide receiver? There's so many different elements to stacking that I don't think that there's necessarily a right or a wrong answer, but I'm interested to dive into physically when I get on the board or on the clock in a draft, how do I start to put together these stacks that can best win me these best ball tournaments?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. I think there's things that I do sometimes where I'm I don't know if I should do this, but I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And when I draft with other people, sometimes, I'll be talking about stacking in a spot where they're like, it's too early to think about that. So I think there's sort of maybe some different philosophies among really sharp drafters that I get to draft with as well. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to think through, because I do think there's a number of ways to attack it.
I think those are the most fun conversations. I actually think the week 17 thing is almost become a little bit boring, because not that there's necessarily a right or a wrong answer, but it's fairly straightforward. It's kind of funny how quickly we evolve in the space, because even last year, certainly 2 years ago, the whole week 17 and kind of playoff correlation stuff was scoffed at, right? And now it's not that it's universally accepted, but it is that I don't know, everybody kind of understands, get to a certain spot of a draft. All these guys are the same. One of them plays, against my quarterback in week 17. I'll take that guy. It makes sense. I think we've wrapped our heads around that. But like you said, I do some things I think that other people would probably say, not only do they not do, they might think are suboptimal. And so the fact that there's so many different ways to think about putting together these forms of stacks. And I think, like you said, sharp drafters all do it differently, but sharp drafters also do tons of different things. I think when I first started in best ball, I pretty much played it like building a DFS team, really. Meaning, okay, so I'm thinking about the price of the stack as a whole, and that was the driving force behind everything. I was never gonna do a premium double stack, right? I was never gonna have Lamar Jackson and T Higgins with Joe Burrow, because I was thinking about it through that DFS lens. I wouldn't really do that in a DFS contest because they're so expensive. It's really cost prohibitive. They need to score 50 points or something. And even then, I still might lose because it could just be really lopsided to Jamar Chase or to T Higgins. And so I've definitely evolved my thought on that. But I don't even think that premise is wrong in a vacuum, but it's that there's so many other different ways that you can go about stacking. So I wanted to start with when you get into a room and you said, I want to build not a specific team or anything like that, but I'm going to put together the stack based on how this draft is filling out. What would be the perfect way for you to do it? Really, really cheap, or an elite quarterback with his number one wide receiver, or if you had to pick your perfect way to start a stack, if you got to choose, what would it be?
I think it would be, I mean, Josh Allen is a good one, I think, where You can get Diggs. I would want to tack on Gabe Davis, right? Because he's going to have some big spike weeks. I'd run a tack on one of the two running backs who are both pretty cheap,
Yep.
and I kind of, I'm more of a Knox guy on the tight end side, but if I could throw Knox on there, that's ideal. And then look, if I wanted to at the end throw on a Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, I'm open to that too. So, for me, it's like because of the prices on those guys, I think you can kind of do like the full stack. But in general, like I want to have at least a double stack ideally. And then I also prefer to have the running back rather than not.
Okay. That's interesting. I think I've come along to that a little bit more, particularly this year. I definitely do it a lot more this year than I have historically. And that's one of those funny things where, like I said, when I came from this DFS angle, I really didn't do. And the specialized pass catching back has like really vanished from the NFL. It's kind of funny how fast that happened. Like just a couple of years ago when we were talking about best ball, we were debating what to do with James White and JD McKissick and all these guys. And like, they almost don't really exist anymore. I guess like a Ty Montgomery or something like that, I guess. And he's not even a running back on Underdog. But I would maybe include a guy like that, right? If I'm stacking the Patriots, I might include James White, but I wasn't even like really considering, including Devin Singletary with my Josh Allen stacks, because again, from a 1 week DFS lineup example, it's not that you can't win, of course, with a running back and the quarterback. Again, the offense scores 50 points and they're priced appropriately. And God forbid, Mahomes and McKinnon was one that certainly worked because McKinnon was basically just a wide receiver. But they're negatively correlated, right? If Damian Harris scores a rushing touchdown, that's a touchdown that obviously Josh Allen can't run for and Josh Allen can't throw for, which in turn takes away from the receivers that you also included with Josh Allen. So I was thinking about it through that lens, and I couldn't get past that roadblock of just being like, no, like Damian Harris's big games come at the expense of all of these other guys. So I don't want to draft him with them. But I've really come around to this, what you just said, in that I kind of think assuming price, right? It's I'm trying to think. CMC and Austin Eckler are kind of the pass catcher, but Bijan, if Ridder were a 7th round pick, Bijan plus Ridder plus London plus Pitts at those prices, I probably wouldn't want to do it as much. But like you said, a lot of these guys, Damian Harris, even the Chiefs running backs are cheap. I'm trying to think of some other all the Eagles running backs are cheap, and you can just soak up all of the points from these really good offenses by including this back. Or even if the offense isn't already really good and established, if it becomes a good offense, now you can soak up all of those, right? I don't want to do the Howell thing again, but Howell or Brissett, but Gibson, right? Brian Robinson, those guys are cheap on that offense, etc.
Throw those guys on. So, not to get into the Howell stuff, but I have a lot of Commanders. I take a lot of Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, a little bit less Antonio Gibson actually right now because he's risen so much in price.
Like almost closing in on a 3-round rise.
It's
pretty
kind of
soon
crazy.
Here.
So I've been kind of sitting that rise out, and maybe I'll get more of him later. Once the coaches remind us that they don't like him on any level. But to me, I'm like, that's kind of a different thing, which we should get into later, sort of stacking without the quarterback. But I'm just betting on that offense. I think that offense, despite my reservations on Howell specifically, those reservations generally are on him holding the job for the full season.
Yeah.
And
very different conversation from being interested in being Commanders.
Fun. Yeah. Be fun and get benched. Like, I can win. I just don't draft you. And then Jacoby Brissett can be, can execute.
It's like Fitzpatrick and Jameis. It's like a much different version of Fitzpatrick and Jameis, right?
Right.
It doesn't really matter which one's in there. They're going to sling it around and score points.
Exactly. That's my thought on the Commanders offense. You can, if your thought is it's going to be so fun that he keeps the job and I'm also going to win by getting that on my team, fair enough. But, that's another thing I like to think about is like, I'm just betting on the offense. Even if I don't have a lot of confidence in, the quarterback holding the job all season, I can still bet on the offense exceeding expectations. Washington, the perfect offense this season to kind of take that point of view, I think, because the backup is pretty interesting. The backup can execute the offense. So, that's definitely one that I think about. I also would say on those elite offenses, I like taking Rashad Penny with Jalen Hurts. I like taking Damian Harris with Josh Allen. I'm not necessarily even going for the positive correlation in a 1 week sample. I'm not going for the Jerick McKinnon. I mean, I will take the James Cook, who could be the Jerick McKinnon, but honestly, he's probably more of like an explosion rusher, right? It's probably closer to a Tony Pollard or something, where he's scoring.
His
on
ceiling case
plays.
Is probably like that's the pipe dream is he's Tony Pollard or something. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I just don't think that Josh Allen's not going to check it down enough, right? It's just not.
Yeah.
So, but maybe he's really good and is scoring from probably a ways out, but delivering you some really nice spike weeks. But the reason that I like taking those like pure 2-down guys is that they don't cost a ton. They're in a range of the draft where if they just happen to, contribute, fairly frequently for your teams, get in the end zone a bunch over the course of the season, they're going to have strong advance rates. They're going to help me get there. It's just, and I've already bet on the offense. I've already said the Bills are going to crush this year. The Bills are going to be great, or the Eagles are going to be great. Those aren't particularly, like, I'm not really even out on a limb with those bets, right? Those are like the best offensive bets in the league. So I'm saying I already know the Bills are going to crush. I already bet this whole team on it. I'm going to tack on, a 10th round pick to, if I'm taking Harris or Penny, right? I'm tacking on a 10th round pick to just, put a little extra down on that bet that I've already made. And the payoff could be pretty nice because maybe I only have one running back to that point, two running backs to that point. That running back hit in that range, which traditionally has been a very good range to draft running backs. The wide receivers I hate in that range. I may already have an elite quarterback. I don't need to take a quarterback in the 10th round if I've got Allen or Hurts. So I'm already like trying to take a running back. So why wouldn't I take
tight end dead zone? It's borderline the tight end, right? It's Evan Ingram, and I don't mind Pat Freiermuth or whatever in Njoku, but like those guys are not like I just recently wrote an article, but I was referencing some projections, and we posted weekly projections to the site a while back, and that range of tight end is like in all those Ingram, Freiermuth, and Njoku that go in that range of tight end project for like one more point than like 16th round tight ends per game.
Yeah.
The running backs, as you said, Damian Harris, Rashad Penny, Antonio, pick your guy around the pick 100 to 120. Those guys project for like 7 more points than a running back just like 2 or 3 rounds later. So like that range is I did want to bring out like that. It's a pretty good sweet spot of the draft as well. So it really does fall together to your point.
It's a sweet spot in terms of the profiles this year. And it traditionally, historically has been a sweet spot for years. It's where we it's the uncertain range of, backfields that we don't have certainty on. Those backs tend to fall in that range. Backs where there's multiple backs. There's a reason why Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson are right there because we're not sure.
Yep.
Right.
Javonte and P. Ryan, Cook and Harris, every backfield it's 100%. That's true.
Yeah. So I want to be, I feel like I'm kind of fishing with dynamite when I take running backs in that range. I want to be overweight on running backs from those rounds to begin with. If I can take a running back who already fits with my bet that this offense is going to score a ton of points, amazing. The other thing is, it's a little harder to do with if you have Hurts or Allen, because if Hurts or Allen completely duds in any of the 3 playoff weeks, and especially week 17, you're not going to finish first. But I do think there's scenarios where in week 15 and 16, you could sneak by with an underwhelming Bills performance. If you stacked it the way I was describing before, where you have like 6 pieces of the offense, probably not.
Yeah.
But in a more
40% of your team is the offense, I'm not sure you could suffer through like Damian Harris. I love him. He's my highest owned running back. A Damian Harris spike week in week 16 is not carrying 7 other Bills.
No, it's not. It is not. But let's talk about the Eagles, and we saw what they did last year when they were absolutely rolling teams. Jalen Hurts can get there. He doesn't have the biggest week ever, but he carries along one of his two top weapons, and then they just like salt the game away with Rashad Penny, and Penny has a massive week. And this is another key consideration. I don't think the field is all that excited to put Penny on their Hurts teams. So I do think there's a little bit of built-in leverage where if Penny goes off in week 15 or 16, he might actually carry in a lower percentage of Fields teams or of Hurts teams. Excuse me. I just called him Justin Fields. Yeah, a lower percentage of Jalen Hurts teams. And I might have an underrepresented Eagles stack despite the Eagles being amazing and allowing Rashad Penny to have this massive week the week before.
And like you said, I think it's so important. Clearly, you were just outlining, and it seemed to happen every goddamn week with the Eagles. That's why it's so prevalent, like in our minds. The first half, right? It's 28-0 at halftime. Hurts has got 250 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. AJ Brown's got 101 or 102, or vice versa to Devonta Smith. Pick one. And then the second half, Miles Sanders runs for 80 more yards and a touchdown. And, and then it's Boston Scott or Kenny Gainwell on the last 2 drives. It was like every other week was this for the Eagles. But what you're like in the week 15 and 16, it's still hard in Best Ball Mania specifically. Now, we'll talk a little bit about, I wanted to get to how this translates to different tournaments that aren't quite as difficult as BBM to advance throughout not only your regular season, but each week of the playoffs. We are in the midst, almost done with our Bulldog draft here at Spike Week. Myself, Silas, Jackson, Trev, and Rob are tag teaming, quad teaming a $500 Bulldog slow draft and recording kind of our thoughts at each pick. We actually pick at the turn, so it works out. We make 2 picks for every video we record. But in that tournament, 4 out of 12 advance to the playoffs. So double the amount of teams compared to, say, BBM or really any best ball tournament. And then it's like 2 out of 6 advance in week 15, and then maybe 1 out of 6 in week 16. And then it's a tiny fine, 8 teams or something like that.
About as small as underdog gets. Yeah.
Yeah. It's super, super small. And so that tournament compared to BBM, you may need to side. It's a tighter needle to thread with doing what we're talking about, what you're talking about, especially with a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen in BBM, because it is going to be tough if Jalen Hurts scores 16 points or whatever in week 16. You're really going to need a monster game from your cheaper quarterback that you probably used. In these other tournaments, which there are tons of, not just this Bulldog, tons of other tournaments where like can you beat 4 other teams in week 15 with 17, 18 points from Jalen Hurts and like 16 from AJ Brown? If Rashad Penny has 20, absolutely you can move on and do that. And so a lot of you can also those types of tournaments are the ones where I'm more interested in doing the Devontae Smith plus AJ Brown plus Jalen Hurts, like plus Goddard, right? That's where I'd be like, you know what, screw it. Like, I just need Hurts plus 2. Like Hurts plus 2 in any of these playoff rounds. It's like I'm already, and if I sacrifice my first round pick to get that, like I only need to beat 5 other teams. Like I think I'm probably okay. Like if I, and now if I'm there with a bunch of other Hurts stacks, maybe I'm not. But but that's also rare because in these smaller fields, there's only so many teams. So there's only one Jalen Hurts team in every draft, and I'm just going to use this Bulldog as an example. There's only 432 teams total in the whole thing. So that's not 432 Jalen Hurts teams. That's 432 total teams, right? So divide that by 12 to get the number of Jalen Hurts teams. How many
36.
of them? 36 Jalen Hurts teams. How many of them are just naked Jalen Hurts? How many of them have just AJ Brown? How many of them just have Devonta Smith or just Dallas Goedert? We tried. We took AJ Brown. AJ Brown fell to us at the 111 in our Bulldog draft. And then at the beginning of the second round, we actually took Devonta Smith to try to do basically what you just outlined. Now, Jalen Hurts went a couple picks before us in the third round, but also that was fine. Now we just made this big bet on the Eagles, but we didn't get Hurts. We're totally fine. But to your point, we specifically targeted that because AJ Brown fell to us in this contest. Whereas in Best Ball Mania,
so
I don't know that I'll have any of the premium Eagles things, or I'm not sure I've even tried for it yet. I'm not saying that's right either, but I'm just saying I'm thinking about BBM differently than the other tournaments, and I think it's important that we outline that.
Yeah, and I have played around with like trying to do the premium double. I think in BBM. I don't know that I've pulled it off in BBM.
I was gonna say, do you have any?
I'm not sure actually. I've done like 33 BBM teams. I think I'm not sure if I have any there, but it certainly is less interesting in Best Ball Mania, where you have to finish first out of 16, first out of 16 again. I mean, I do think that it's possible to advance, and it could be quite it could be interesting, if you are able to get like a low owned Devontae Smith through to the final,
Right.
or a low owned AJ Brown, because one
That's
of them
the
blows
reason.
up.
That's the reason to do it, is like you almost, it's not a guarantee, but you almost do guarantee yourself, if it hits, one of those receivers like can't be super, super popular in the finals.
Right. Yeah. I think that one issue that I have with it is that it's actually hard to complete. So if I knew that, like, if I take AJ Brown a little early, let's say ahead of Kelsey, not like reaching up above Hill or Cup, but I just take him ahead of Kelsey, and then I can get Devontae Smith very easily in the second. And then I know Hurts is always there in the third. I'd be more willing to do it. But the fact that I'm like, sometimes I've done it once in the puppy where Hurts got sniped and then I took Allen, and I was like, well, like, like I'm just, maybe I can, but then that might not be very good, because now I've spent a ton of capital. It's like a little thin, right? You need
that's
like
can we talk about that though? Can we talk about that though for a second? Because that's kind of interesting from a stacking perspective. We'll definitely get to the stacking without the quarterback, but this kind of is some part of it.
That is sort of stacking without the quarterback.
But then what's a big perk of stacking without the quarterback? Generally, like I asked you at the very top, like, if you had it to do, you had you got to pick your absolute perfect stack or whatever. Part of mine might actually have, will almost assuredly have stacks without the quarterback, but it's going to be with like the pocket passer. So like last year, clearly didn't work very well because your team won with Tom Brady, but I wasn't drafting Tom Brady, but I wasn't ignoring the Bucks, even though I was kind of like down on the Bucks. But like I drafted a fuck ton of Chris Godwin last year, right? Like I was drafting these. Rachaad White, I know you were big on Rachaad White last year. I was drafting the Bucks 100%, but I was doing essentially this, stacking without the quarterback, because it's so hard for a guy who literally has no rushing in his profile. Aaron Rodgers this year. I'm drafting the Jets, but I really don't take Aaron Rodgers that much unless, right, he falls past ADP. I don't have a quarterback yet. I kind of just need it. I'm not like going out of my way to take him, but it's because of kind of what you started to hint at that example. You can still get the juice out of Hurts, is a little different, but you can still get the juice out of the Eagles and then pivot to the Bills. And now you have just this mega team, right? Now you take Rashad Penny later and you load up with all those Bills you used in your example, right? Now you won't have Diggs, but maybe that's okay, right? You just piecemeal all these other, you get Gabe, you get one of the tight ends, you get Damian Harris, you throw on Khalil Shakir later. And it's like, I don't know. Now I'm loaded up with the Eagles and Bills. I can kind of like ping pong around different weeks. I almost feel like if that's not an interesting way to do it, I don't know about Josh Allen 100%, but I think that build is like kind of interesting from a stacking perspective.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And, when Liam won 2 years ago, he had Jamar Chase, but he had Josh Allen, of course he did. Right. So he didn't have Joe Burrow, and you will see the elite quarterbacks separate some, but in terms of where you get the most separation and kind of what pieces are most likely to be like the absolute had to have pieces, they're going to be more skill players. In his case, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like you had to have Amon-Ra St. Brown
and Rashad Penny
and Rashad Penny. Yeah. But you, despite Burrow going off, you could get by without him. As field sizes increase, that becomes less and less the case. You'll need closer to the pure nuts, the bigger that the field is. But, Best Ball Mania is not exactly how I would have designed it this year, but I kind of like that the field size is roughly the same as last year. It's actually a little bit smaller. So it isn't now to the point where we need to start thinking like we got to do single stacks, like anything over, round 5, we can only stack one because we need that guy to go off at the other. We can't do this stuff where you can kind of go in and basically understand that most likely one of Devontae Smith or AJ Brown's probably not going to do much this week, but you're just hoping the other one blows up. Like, nope, there's going to be a team in there that has the right single stack, and that's going to beat you. There might not be. There's not that many teams that certainly there will be single stacks, but they might not have the other pieces that you need. And there's so many roster spots compared to DFS. There's 18 roster spots. Like if you have a last round, 16th round pick that puts up like 30 points, I mean, there's not going to be that many teams with that guy. So now it comes down to who had that guy plus the right other stuff. So that's why I think it's a much more nuanced conversation than a DFS, where it's like, yeah, if you try to put together Hurts, Devontae Smith, and AJ Brown on a DFS lineup, if one of those guys fails, like the lineup fails because they were so expensive. If one of those guys fails in not just week 17, but week 15 or 16, in week 15 or 16, it can actually be good because it gives you leverage. And in week 17, you can overcome it. I did not have my second round pick hit my lineup in week 17. Saquon Barkley dudded out. Daniel Jones went off. Daniel Jones didn't hit my final lineup because, again, quarterbacks don't always even hit your lineup, even if they have good weeks, because they don't separate quite as much as skill
he
players.
scored like 35 points and didn't make your lineup.
Didn't hit my lineup. Right. That kind of thing can happen like way more frequently because you only start one. I mean, it's just simple math, right? You only start one. So, but the example I think still is interesting that second round pick Saquon Barkley doesn't do anything. Quarterback goes off. I did have him stacked with Wan'Dale Robinson. He was injured, didn't matter. But, that kind of general theory of things like worked out. It didn't end up helping me in any way, but there was at the same time, you would maybe think that not having my second round pick hit my lineup would have hurt me more than it did. But in fact, Saquon Barkley was hugely owned in the final, and being able to get there without him was helpful because had Saquon gone off, a lot more teams, that looked like mine, right, would have been along for the ride at the top of the standings. Getting Mostert, who slotted in with like 19 points to replace Barkley, was a huge blessing because Mostert was not someone who was nearly as well represented.
It's so interesting because we started kind of with it all does kind of end up coming back to this leverage idea. And we started with it on like, okay, essentially the Damian Harris, Rashad Penny, et cetera, all that it's not just leverage because, of course, like you said, you're making this big bet on this offense. There's ways that in any given week everybody can eat, right? If the pie's big enough, everybody can fucking eat in a single week. We saw that with the Eagles last year. We see it with the Chiefs sometimes, right? We used to see it with the Chiefs when they had Tyreek and Kelsey, right? It'd be like Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey, and a running back would score 18 points or whatever. Because if that team scored 40 something, it's a lot of fantasy points to go around. So it's not that it's only leverage. But in this game, like we know inherently that leverage is like the most important thing in this whole freaking right. You snuck a Bucks stack, Bucks with DJ Moore bring back stack into the finals, and Austin Eckler, who was hilariously not that popular in the final despite being the RB1.
Yeah, because Justin Jefferson was.
Exactly.
It was hard to get there without Jefferson.
He just blew away the field, and he had a good playoff up until week 17, right? Mm-hmm. So like you said, it's really hard to get there. But that isn't manufactured leverage. That was found leverage. It just happened to you. It was luck. Yeah. You stumbled across it, right? You didn't follow there was no, you weren't following some path to the end of the rainbow where it was this fucking pot of gold. It just landed, it fell out. It's cloudy with a chance of meatballs. It just fell out of the fucking sky and landed.
Fell in my lap.
Yeah. Which is, that more often than not, that's going to happen. But we're also in search of ways to give ourselves leverage if at all possible, when something breaks our way.
The Jones one was real leverage. The Jones one didn't hit
100%.
right, but you could say I manufactured that leverage because
Yes.
I took the running back and the quarterback, and as it turns out, right, Jones, I believe, was running for a fair amount of those touchdowns.
It did hit. It's just you didn't need it because you had the fucking nuts everywhere.
well, not Mike Evans. I didn't actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's more like what you're talking about with you can manufacture the leverage if you take the running back and the quarterback. And I think taking the running back and the quarterback, even if it's like more on the more expensive side, is now, I guess, do we have any real examples of that? But like, okay, I would say Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, I draft them together a fair amount.
Yeah,
I'm
a really
totally
good one.
fine with that. And a lot of people would be like, that's so, like that. You just don't get what you're doing. Like Anthony Richardson's going to steal all the rushing touchdowns, so Taylor's not going to be, he's going to limit Taylor's receiving upside. And then, if Richardson hits, it's because he rushes for a bunch of touchdowns. And so what's the point? You basically just waste your first round pick, just bet on Richardson. But my thing is, if we thought the Colts were going to be good, Jonathan Taylor would not be going in like the late second round or the mid second round.
Correct.
He's Jonathan Taylor.
Bijan goes in the first. I love Bijan. He's an amazing prospect. He's going to be good on the Falcons and everything like that. But like Bijan's going in the first round. Jonathan Taylor, the former 101, or top 3 pick in fantasy, is going late second. And I don't really know the difference between the two, really.
He's probably the best breakaway runner in the NFL. He's 24 years old. We have no age-related concerns with him at all. Prime of his career. And the questions are basically, are the Colts going to be good? Are the Colts going to be able to support scoring?
Yep.
And if Richardson hits, it's because the Colts are good, right? If he hits, the Colts by by definition are good. Yeah, he makes them good. So to me, I'm like, Colts are good, right? If I draft Taylor, the Colts are good. So I'm also interested in drafting Richardson because the Colts are good. So that, to me, I'm like, this is easy. It's not. I don't have to get in the weeds of, what if the touchdowns, how are the touchdowns distributed? Like, I don't know. That to me, that kind of overcomplicates it. Like, yes, I could run bad with the touchdowns where, Taylor scores 1 and only has 80 rushing yards in week 16, and Richardson runs for 1, throws for 1, and doesn't have a big week, and the team's dead. But like, if the touchdowns are cannibalized to where Taylor runs for 3 1 week, sweet. Richardson's I'm taking him in the 90s, late 90s, even in the hundreds now.
He's getting into the hundreds now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh no, my late 9th round pick at quarterback didn't hit my lineup. Oh God, how could I possibly survive?
That was Tom Brady last year, by the way. On the team that won was Tom Brady was never hitting your goddamn lineup last year, and then poof, it happened in week 17.
Yeah, so I just, I think like simplifying it a little bit and saying I'm just making a bet on the offense, even with the more expensive guys, I think is still okay. There are probably points to where it wouldn't work, right? If let's say Desmond Ridder, and this is hilarious to think, but let's say Desmond Ridder was a 3rd round pick. Okay. If I was taking Bijan 1st round, Desmond Ridder 3rd round, Drake London 4th round, Kyle Pitts late 5th round, probably bad. That seems like that's probably too much, but that's like ahead of that, I probably am not really drawing a line right now.
And why you say that it's bad, to make that clear for everyone, is that the cost is obviously important. I think most people, if you're listening to this, you have an understanding of kind of ADP and what that means and why cost is important. But why cost is important in terms of over investing in a stack is not because like it's necessarily 100% even wrong in spending a bunch of picks on the same offense. It is that when we're trying to navigate through this, there's 4 rounds of these contests, right? The regular season, then three playoff rounds. You need enough juice, weekly juice from your entire lineup, because you inherently just drafted multiple guys who are not going to hit your lineup every week. It's borderline impossible, right? For 4 or 5 guys from the same offense. About as big of a certainty as there is in a game that's nothing but uncertainty is that all of those guys are not going to hit your lineup consistently, at least, and probably will only happen maybe in a good outcome a couple times a year. So you have just said, I'm drafting 2 guys, right? And this is just going to happen naturally in fantasy football. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to suck, whatever. Liam won with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields when he didn't do shit as a rookie or something like that. The guy that won drafters, fucking cumulative scoring over 17 weeks, had Zach Wilson last year as his QB2. Just absolute insanity. But you just said 2 guys are not going to make my line. So now I'm down to 16, right? For every single week. The cheaper you make those guys, the lower your projection gets, the lower chances you have, right? You need you need serious injuries to happen to like get some contingent value for your late round guys. And then your opponents just have those guys too, right? Unless it's like Eli Mitchell or CPAT 2 years ago. So you just don't have enough juice in your lineup to make up for the fact that you just said, I'm punting off a couple of my spots. Now, if you do it smartly, we just outlined why it might make sense. Maybe they do all hit your lineup. Maybe you're building in that manufactured leverage. There are ways to do it. It's just, it's that delicate balancing act that's honestly really hard. But I think it's the right path to figure out how to do that tightrope walk.
I've done, and maybe you think this is bad, given that we just kind of outlined how tough it is for those guys to all hit together. But the fact that Ridder isn't, in the 3rd round, he's in the last round, makes betting on the Falcons more appealing. I also don't really care if I have Ridder. I've done in the
100%.
5-5-5, which isn't quite as easy to advance in as the Bulldog, but it's not Best Ball Mania. I believe that's what it was in. I did a Bijan London Pitts, which is definitely thin, but like I get tight end eligibility with Pitts, and I get potentially I hit on one of the running backs you have to have this year in Bijan Robinson. And then, maybe London is a little more inconsistent because Pitts is really good, but I'm still getting like a 4th, 5th round. I guess probably
also concentrated.
He goes so much later there. I don't know when I took him, but anyway.
Also very the concentration is an important variable though too. We've talked about the Eagles. It's like, I mean, I like Dallas Goedert fine, but Dallas Goedert's like a 15 to 18% target share. I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't remember what it was last year, but it wasn't all that high actually, because it's AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Like we tried to pipe dream about Quez and Zach Pascal and these guys as being like, oh, we can toss this guy in the late round. None of that shit mattered. It was Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith with a sprinkle of Dallas Goedert. So when it's that concentrated, it is easier for A, those guys to just both have good seasons, but B, for them to hit your lineup at the same time. Or right, like you said, the manufactured leverage comes into play because it's so concentrated that unless they get blanked on offense, someone's doing something, and there's only like 3 guys that it could be. And that's what I like about the Falcons. Plus, like you said, if you want Ridder, A, you don't have to do it. Similar to how the Commanders thing, you don't. Nothing says you have to draft that quarterback.
The Commanders is a better way to go because they profile as a potential Seahawks-like offense where it's 2 dudes, it's 2 guys. So I can get the whole offense if I have McLaurin, the whole passing offense, if I have McLaurin and I have Dotson, right? Mm-hmm. Like Logan Thomas isn't even being drafted. They're talking about using the tight end a little bit, but I'm skeptical, right?
I know. I take him, but that will be adjusted when camp comes around. If I get the hint of oh my God, this guy's dust, or it's Cole Turner time or something like that.
And then Curtis Samuel, I think is totally draftable, but he wasn't as impressive last year. If Dotson takes a 2nd-year leap and pays off his ADP, I think Samuel could be in a little bit tougher shape. He could kind of go to like a poor man's Tyler Boyd as you have the 2 guys emerging, right? So that's kind of the hope there. And when you do those 2 stack together, tack on Howell if you want, you don't have to though, because you're getting the offense. The bet is that's another offense I just got. I just scooped another offense. I made a simple bet that the Commanders score more points than people expect this year. And in that case, it doesn't cost you like that much to do it. And it's also in a range of drafts where I really want to be drafting wide receivers. If I'm going, late 4th round, McLaurin, early 7th round, Dotson. I mean, I love that. I've done that a fair amount.
I love it too. And that's another thing about just this whole stacking conversation is that we obviously always want to be cognizant of like what you just said and what we talked about with the running backs too, right? The Penny, Damian Harris, and those kinds of things. It's all caveated by like making sure you're understanding the whole best ball landscape, the ADP right? We always talk about like this pocket of the draft, or people use dead zones and all that kind of stuff. But like you said, from the late 3rd to 8th, 9th round, 7th for sure, probably 8th round, we get to. I always just keep using the Rashad Bateman is like the.
Although I would say
line.
With this cortisone thing, I'm not particularly worried about it after looking into it more. But I think the market said he's with Sutton now. He's not a part of the crew. I think. Yeah. I'm not even sure who the last guy is anymore. Is it Brandon Cooks? Maybe.
Cooks. Yeah. Cooks.
Yeah.
I need to. Anyway, everybody gets the point. You
Quentin
can
Johnston.
all draw your own
line
huge.
There.
Yeah, somewhere around that in the 80s of ADP. They're in the 80s of ADP. You pick your personal line, whether it is Bateman, Zay Flowers, Sutton, Cooks, Quentin Johnston, etc. There's a group there because, and why I say that is because after them is, I love JMO, but he's suspended for six weeks, so we obviously can't quite include him. If he were not suspended, he'd probably go in front of these guys, but like he would be in this mix. He is suspended though. Michael Thomas. Oh, people are scared of Calvin Ridley. Michael Thomas hasn't played in the same amount of time as Calvin Ridley, and he's much older. I don't want to say much, but he is older.
I draft some Michael Thomas sometimes.
I know. I literally just drafted him last night because I'm very into the Saints. But there's Michael Thomas. Cortland Sutton also hasn't done shit in a long time.
Right.
Juju, Alan Lazard, Jacoby Myers, Tyler Boyd. Like we just tossed Tyler Boyd in. I know. I draft all these guys. You get forced into it.
Sky Moore I drafts now again. I'm back.
Yeah. We're gonna get a Sky Moore Steam Part 2 is in the midst of happening here. He's separating from all
drafting him.
He's separating from all the. He's gonna pass Tony in a few.
He's getting athletic. He's the cover boy of Athletic Stories. What am I supposed to do?
Fucking unsubscribe from the Athletic apparently, so that we can stop doing this Sky Moore bit. But the point is, like you said, these things can fall into place where it's like if you didn't want to do AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, you're like, well, look at these 2nd round running backs. Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb. You talked about JT, Saquon Barkley, Ramondre, Breece Hall. Like maybe I don't want to invest in all of the Eagles offense because the alternatives are like guys that used to be like top 5 picks in fantasy. Like Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb would have been top 5 picks 5 years ago in fantasy. Now you can get them in the late 2nd round, right? JT was the 101. Nothing has changed except the offense probably has more upside. That's downside too, but nothing has changed. Now he goes in the late 2nd. Those things are important. The Dots and McLaurin thing is like, we all have running backs around. I really like J.K. Dobbins again this year. But like these 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round running backs, like, I don't know. If I don't have them, it seems fine. But again, because then look, 10th round, there's Damian Harris, there's Rashad Penny, there's Antonio Gibson, there's all these guys. You navigate these pockets of the draft and you can combine these stacking things. Yeah, and be like, well, I'm in this spot. Let's just stack up Washington. Whether I take Howell or Brissett or whatever, who cares? Seattle. Want to stack up Seattle? Do it whenever the hell you want. DK Metcalf's always freely available after, the early tiers of wide receivers. Lockett and JSN, get them whenever you want. Geno, get him whenever you want. Want to stack them up? Do you need Geno? Don't have to do it if you don't want Geno, right? Maybe you took an elite. You took Hurts. You don't need Geno, but you can still stack the Seahawks, right? I did it last year, failed miserably, but did it last year with Pittsburgh. I don't want Big Ben. Big Ben has no use on my fantasy teams, but that doesn't mean Deontay and Pickens and these guys can't eat, right? They can catch a bunch of Freiermuth. They can catch a bunch of passes. So you can combine all these different things to put them into this stacking thing. And I think that's part of what is also important. It's not just like, oh, just go stack the Eagles, dummy. Go stack the Bills. Like you have to kind of combine all this stuff.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say about stacking is I don't go into drafts saying I'm going to stack this team, right? Like
Yep.
maybe if I'm looking at my exposure, I'm like, all right, no, whatever. Maybe I would sort of say, if it falls to me, even close to falling to me, I'm going to try to get this done. But, it depends kind of where things land and, how the draft's going along. And then no matter who I've taken, I do want to start building in stacks around who I've taken or who I'm going to take, that you can also be aware of, if you don't have a tight end through the end of, round 6, Goddard's off the board already, right? You're kind of in the later round 7 range. I will sometimes take Waller, and now all of a sudden I've got myself a Giants Rams stack around, and I've only taken one player, but I already know like I can get Daniel Jones if I want. If I don't get Daniel Jones, so what? I already have my Giant. I can easily tackle on Rams. I can go get Van Jefferson, Stafford, tackle on Tutu, tackle on Puka, do whatever you want. I have actually yet to tackle on Puka, but people like Puka, so I'll give him a little shout.
I'm taking two. I took a little bit of Puka. The very first like blurb we got or whatever, I was like, I'll sprinkle some Puka in, whatever. Sure. 18th round wide receiver, open depth chart, whatever.
Higbee also is free.
Totally free. Then Puka is like, the second coming of Sky Moore. Puka's going like I immediately after the first couple blurbs, it's like I'm seeing like 16th round Puka. Like, what the fuck just happened? Like all of a sudden he went from drafted in like 1% of drafts to people are like making him a priority at pick 175 or whatever. So then now I'm like back on Tutu. Now Tutu's getting the hype. Now, like I think just today.
Yeah, he just got a blurb today.
Tutu. Yeah, but anyway,
I've been on Tutu the whole time. Welcome back.
Point being, dude, I drafted some Tutu last year, and I can't. This is 100% a leak in my game. He was so good in college. He was good, like so good, like dominant. I don't mean like he caught a bunch of long touchdowns or whatever. Like I'm not talking. This wasn't MVS. This was like 40% target share, like. The most dominant player in the ACC.
He's like an Elijah Moore level prospect, but just too small. He was just crazy small.
So it was so hard for me to separate. And like I've talked about this. College football DFS might be my favorite form of DFS. And like Tutu was like an auto play, and Louisville's defense. Louisville was like the Detroit Lions, and Tutu was like when Amon-Ra went on that run at the end of the year. Like it was literally you just played him, and they have Malik Cunningham was their former quarterback who's also a dual threat quarterback. It was like if Louisville was on a college football DFS slate, you were like, okay, I'm playing Malik Cunningham and I'm stacking him with Tutu, and I'm playing at least another dude on the other side, maybe two, because Louisville's defense is so fucking bad. It was like autoplay, and so you watch a lot, and I'm like, he's just like awesome. It's just God made him 150 pounds. If he were 175 pounds, like he would be like, I mean, he would have been a first round pick. He would have been an elite prospect. And so I've really had a hard time like detaching myself from how good I think Tutu is with the weight issues. I can't wrap my or the just size issues.
I mean, for me, Tutu's like just put him out there because he looked good last year.
He was good last year.
Yeah. So if there's reports that like no, they're gonna play Tutu, then I'm in. That's all I need. Just he's going to see the field. I'm in. I think he's good. So I like getting him late. And he helps knowing that you can get Tutu or probably Puka, right? If Tutu starts to get hype, then Puka will fall away. But there's a Rams wide receiver just like sitting there in the last rounds for you. Van Jefferson's moved up because ETR moves the market on all these guys. But, he's still not like super expensive.
Thank God they do the guys like Van Jefferson that I don't give a fuck about to move.
I was drafting Van.
I know. I mean, I drafted him some too, but like the fact that he moves up, I'm not like, God damn it. Like
it isn't
like Jalen Warren went from like pick 170 to like he's going to be in like the 110s. So like this is a meteoric rise, and I'm not happy about that because I want to draft Jalen Warren. Van Jefferson moving up is like whatever. I'll just draft Tutu. If I don't have Van, I think I'll be okay.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about stacking, as you're kind of thinking through it as the draft goes on. One of the reasons I really like it, this is one of the reasons I like week 17 correlation as well, is that it forces you to draft players who you normally aren't going to draft. And look, I don't want to just I had a friend who was asking me about, he plays fantasy but doesn't really play best ball, and he was sort of saying like, if you're drafting a bunch of teams this year, like, are you just trying to like cover like every player? And at that point, aren't you just sort of giving away like edge? You know what I mean? Like if you have the guys you like, shouldn't you just draft them? And if you're just drafting them, like how many teams do you really need to do?
Fair question.
Like, right. But the way I think about it is I want to draft as many really smartly constructed teams that make bets on specific offenses, teams that are internally consistent. They're betting on specific outcomes, and they're built so that if certain outcomes occur, they're going to vault to the top of the standings. They're going to advance more easily through the playoff rounds, etc. If I have any Odell Beckham teams this year, which I actually do, even though I don't like taking them, I want them as part of Lamar Jackson teams. I want them correlated with Lamar Jackson has an absolutely insane season, the type of season that powers Odell Beckham to a comeback. If I have any Dalton Kincaid teams, which I now have a few of, it's because he's falling past ADP is a big part of it with Kincaid, because I think Kincaid's wildly overpriced. But he's stacked with Josh Allen. Like, I'm not taking so it's like I am willing to full fade a guy, but if that guy is usually past ADP and then I have him stacked, at least if I take him there and I happen to be wrong on that player has an amazing season, he's helping that team more than just any regular old team. It's that I've at least now kind of harnessed that hit that I have less of than everyone else, but I have it on a team that is going to make the most of it. So that's why I think it's not just about kind of spreading out your exposures or, taking smaller stands. It's that on the times that you do go away from your convictions on these player takes, you're getting more for when the conviction was wrong and this player ends up being a hit.
Kincaid is a really good example of that, actually. This is something that I've definitely tried to be cognizant of, because again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, that I am probably like a player take guy at my core, but I've really had to force myself out of being too stark with it. Not because I think that's wrong. That's a discussion for another day about, exposures and how do you handle your player takes and stuff. But I have tried to think through, Dalton Kincaid, even if I dislike this player at this cost, if I'm wrong, what does that mean? What happens when I'm wrong, right? I just talked about Van Jefferson. Like, if I'm wrong about, and like I said, I was actually drafting Van, I'm neutral to Van Jefferson. He's fine. But like, let's say I'm fuck that. I'm not drafting any Van Jefferson. He sucked. He can't win me anything. He might not even start. Puka's the guy, right? It's going to be Puka and Tutu and Cooper Kupp. If I'm wrong, what happens? Nothing. Like, okay, he catches a couple more touchdowns than I thought. Like, darn.
He's high enough to where it doesn't hurt that much. Juju would be another example of like, yes, Juju's not going to bury me.
What
happened? He might have a good advance rate. I might be like, I should have been more open-minded because he had like a 20% advance rate.
But those are the losses. Like, it's fine. Like, if I'll eat that L and it doesn't kill me, I can still win these tournaments if I didn't draft much Van Jefferson. Dalton Kincaid, especially when we start to factor in a falling price, like you said, past ADP, I think the market has generally soured on him a little bit. Most smart people have come out and said it
took him long.
He has a tough path to like a really fantasy friendly kind of full-time role. But as the price falls, like, what if we're all wrong about Dalton Kincaid? What if he does just usurp Dawson Knox? He's, running whatever percentage of the routes we want to call from the Bills. We've outlined for multiple years now, part of why Gabe Davis got so much steam last year was, besides Stephon Diggs, there is no one to get targets in Buffalo. Diggs is now aging, and his diva tendencies are apparently coming back out here this offseason. And Gabe Davis has basically proven to just be Gabe Davis, right? Spike week guy, never going to generate a monster target share. They didn't bring anybody else in. So what if Kincaid is just fucking Travis Kelce, right? I mean, it's a little bit of hyperbole, but what if first round pick, talented wide receiver? Well, that probably means him and
people
Josh
are going to tilt, but Pitts is the actual example.
1,000
yards as a rookie.
Good. That's very true. Pitts, 100%. If people are like, this dude sucks, the Falcons suck, blah, blah, blah. What if Pitts really is the transcendent player that some people believe he can be?
No, sorry. I mean, Kincaid having Pitts rookie season.
Oh, having Pitts. Got it. Pitts is actually another example. Probably, actually, if Pitts is the best receiving tight end of all time, what does that mean? Well, Ritter's probably going to be okay.
It means my portfolio looks pretty good right now.
Yes, exactly. It means the Falcons are probably pretty good. Ritter's probably pretty good. Whatever. But Kincaid is that. Like, if we're all wrong and this first-round tight end is just awesome because he's a first-round pick, he's a good receiver, whatever, the Bills' offense is going to be even better because it's been awesome with Dawson Knox is just a dude, basically, at tight end. And so, like you said, thinking through that, it's like, well, I want my Kincaid bet to be on the right kind of teams that say when Kincaid is a star, this team is going to win the whole goddamn tournament, right? That's why, even though it's become a pretty popular thing to do at the 4 or 5 turn, it's why Justin Fields and DJ Moore is something I don't want to be underweight on. And say whatever you want about the Bears situation. We don't need to go into the pass volume stuff again, but the ceiling outcome on Justin Fields and DJ Moore, like breaking out together almost, is like
not almost. Like that's what would happen. Justin Fields becomes a star as a passer. In those scenarios, like DJ Moore, and the reverse is like even more true. Like if DJ Moore crushes a late 4th round ADP, I want Fields.
Yes, you want Fields on that team, right? But not every stack is like that. There are these certain things that you have to think through, like the Bucks. I take some Godwin and Evans. I was taking them a little bit more early. I kind of soured a little bit on them. Mainly just there's just a lot of receivers in that range, and like none of them have Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask as their quarterback. So I feel like kind of like the other guys, but there's not a situation where it's like, oh yeah, these two ceilings are correlated, man. Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, right? Like what if Baker bounces? I guess technically, like what if Baker bounces back? But like, let's be realistic. That's not something that's really even in the range of outcomes versus these other ones. When I'm stacking that, like you said, my Kincaid teams are going to be smartly built. Whereas like my Mike Evans teams is just like, I don't know, he's the best receiver available here. I'm going to mix Mike Evans.
Exactly.
I don't really care.
I'll mix in Mike Evans. I probably should mix in Mike Evans actually more than I do. I view Godwin and Evans as like fairly similar bets actually, which I'm awful in the market in. I think the market strongly prefers Godwin, but I end up with more. I'm probably even the discrepancy is bigger there. This is maybe one thing we should talk about in the future. Like getting your exposures the way you want them can be tough because the way that the market kind of pushes you certain
really
directions.
Hard.
Yeah. So I'd rather be overweight Evans than underweight Godwin, but it's the reverse for me right now. But those guys are not ones where I don't even really like taking them together. That's one of the few ones that I don't really take together because I feel like they're like I would like they're most positively correlated if like one of them gets traded. I think
I think that's probably the reason to take them together. That would be the main reason is Evans gets shipped to Buffalo or whatever.
They don't have super tradable contracts though, and with Hopkins still sitting out there, and it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe Godwin would be the guy that people got more excited to trade for, but he's I think harder to trade anyway. I'm not taking a ton of those guys together, and I don't feel like I need to bet on them to be tied to their quarterback because we want to be looking at the ones where it's actually realistic, where it's like we're already kind of as a collective making a bet on Fields as a potential big time breakout candidate. How does it happen? Same as Josh Allen, like he's going very expensively. So what's one of the ways where that is like ends up looking cheap? I mean, one of the ways would be if Kincaid's a superstar. I don't think that all that likely. That's why I don't pair them all, that frequently. But it's definitely possible. Odell Beckham is maybe an even better example of that. Like I have taken Lamar Jackson, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, and Odell Beckham. I've done the full triple stack of the wide receivers. I haven't gotten Andrews there. If I had Andrews, I would probably just skip Beckham. But I'm like, you know what? Beckham's cheap enough in a range of the draft where there's really like no other wide receivers to where like if he broke out of this range, then it would actually be like quite helpful for this particular team, the way it's constructed, because it'll be sort of a contrarian, structure to be, and allows me to maybe get more running back help early or whatever. kind of, or bails me out from having gone running back early. And if Lamar does actually strike me as the type of quarterback that could support a, let's say 2 receivers on the 7-8 turn and a guy in like the, the end of the 11th is probably where I'd be taking Beckham.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's certainly not taking him at the end of the 9th. So, but in that kind of range. So that's like, it's not that expensive. If Lamar pays off an early 4th round or late 3rd round ADP, they have more passing volume. They actually lean into him as a passer. He still runs a bunch. Maybe Andrews misses some time. I can see it, right? And I do not like drafting Odell Beckham. I don't really like drafting Zay Flowers at his price. I'm still in on Bateman, but I'm willing to take, in that case, like 2 wide receivers, so I don't feel that good about. But at least the team is like very internally consistent. It's making a clear bet that Lamar breaks out in a huge way as a passer this season on more volume.
I love that. And just quickly, the merry-go-round of Ravens wide receiver ADP has been rather humorous to watch this offseason. It started, and I don't know about DraftKings or Drafters, so I apologize. I've been drafting on Underdog for the last week or so. Shout out to them with the, what was it called? The Chihuahua and stuff. Some of these contests are really fun. I like some of these contests to like play around with stuff, experiment with different things. Some of the things that we're talking about here, like I have teams like you just outlined, Lamar and all the wide receivers, and maybe I have Tyreek and Waddle on that, and we're really having fun, with that week 17.
The teams I know I've done that. I don't think I've done that Best Ball Mania. I've done it in the Puppy. I have it in the Puppy too. I've got some teams like that. I've done a lot of Lamar stuff in the Puppy too. Yeah,
I love Lamar is the guy that, again, taking into account like the landscape and stuff. I think the Ravens we talked about Fields and the Bears, but I think the Ravens are like the cleanest bet when you like factor in everything, the prices and the pockets where all these guys go is like so smooth, man. Like you could realistically draft like every Raven basically, and they would probably fall in a spot where you're like, yeah, I could make a case they're the best guy on the board. Or like we just talked about how Bateman and kind of Zay Flowers could be perceived as a cutoff at wide receiver, a drop right there. They're the line in the sand where you really don't want anybody after them, and everybody before them is all kind of bunched together. Mark Andrews goes after, basically, other than Brees, he goes after like all the elite running backs and all the elite wide receivers and all the elite quarterbacks, essentially, besides Lamar, I guess. Lamar goes after all those guys in this range, the late third, right from like Ridley and those guys down to frickin', I don't know, Christian Kirk is like 20 wide receivers that I don't know. I just throw my hands up every draft and like mix them around. So like, again, they go in these pockets where it's like J.K. Dobbins goes in the late 50s or something, which again is this big wide tier in the whole draft. Odell goes in the wide receiver dead zone where the juju zone where you don't want anybody. It's like the Raven stacks fall together so clean. And so that's a thing where it's like, if I'm not forcing it, like the Eagles one, like you talked about earlier, why, it may be tough to force yourself to even try for the Eagle stack. The Raven stack, you don't have to try. It just happens, man. Like those guys are the best player on the board a lot of the times when you just come up like constantly. And those are the ones where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to be overweight that. I like them. I think the upside bet with Monken in town and the new weapons in town and everything is smooth. It's so easy to see this being a big hit, but also it's like, it's kind of like a small loss. Like, I don't know, other than Lamar getting hurt again, I don't really see how you lose that much on these guys at these prices. So just everything comes together. That's another, again, important part about all this is like, I don't have a lot of Eagle stacks because of other factors. It has nothing to do with the Eagles. It's other factors. I have a lot of Ravens stacks. Of course, I like the Ravens, but it has a lot to do with all this other shit too, price and pockets of the draft and all that.
For sure. Yeah. I also think like understanding how the stacks come together and getting familiar with how those stacks come together. Like you're talking through the Ravens one. It's like a really easy one to get your head around because you can do it with Andrews if you're really lucky right now, but it's hard. But then
you
the
have
receivers,
to reach, or you have to reach, which I don't love to do, but I am going to do it a little bit because I want to have, I've done it in the Puppy. I want to
From the
have
1-2
Tyreek,
turn.
Lamar,
Or the-
and Andrew. Like I want to have teams
Yeah.
that have that. I want to have. I've done it with like Jefferson. It's like everybody.
That's
I
who
think
I've
will
done it with. Yeah.
more likely do it with Tyreek, but like I want to have Justin Jefferson with a Lamar Andrews stack. Like I don't want to have zero of those three players together, and you won't get it unless you do it at the 2-3 turn. So I'm just going to do it a few times. Not anything crazy though.
Yeah, I've done it a fair amount at the 2-3 turn in the puppy, probably like, I don't know, 4 times or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another thing, right? If you're gonna do stuff like reaching for stacks, I would do it in tournaments that are limited in the time. Don't, right? Because it might be the case that all these quarterbacks fall, and as a late third round drafter, I know that I have a realistic shot at Jalen Hurts in any given draft, and I've got AJ Brown, right? So that means I'm much less likely to just be the guy who scoops up a falling Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson might settle into the 4th. And so all of a sudden getting Andrews Jackson in 3-4 might be very common.
It could become very common. Yeah. In August. And someone might say a galaxy brain person like myself might say, well, really it's just like a player combination thing, right? Instead of taking them at the 2-3 turn with Justin Jefferson, you're going to take them at the 3-4 turn with CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's really just kind of like a 2v2 game that you're playing, but you can always go back and reach on them, right? In August. If you want them with Justin Jefferson, you can do that in August too. Now it's a bigger reach, but who gives a fuck? It really doesn't matter. If you're going to reach, you're going to reach. It doesn't really matter if they're 3-4 turn picks or mid third round. Right now, they're like mid third round picks. It's not, there's no difference. You can always go back and get those other player combinations, but you can't, if you take them now, right? You can't have that back. You don't get that back, but you can always go do it again later. It's kind of the inverse of, people will say, get really like, shout out to the people in the Spike Week Discord. People probably brought it up in your Discord as well. Like, oh my God, I never get the 102. They're like, I want to have Jamar Chase, but I've gotten the 102 once out of 25 drafts or whatever. I'm running so bad. And they're like, should I take Jamar Chase 101? I'm like, you are never going to be able to get those Justin Jefferson teams back if you do not take him at the 101. This is the inverse of that. You can always go back and reach on these to adjust. If you like, I don't have enough Lamar Andrews. I don't have any with Justin Jefferson. You can do that whenever you want. But you cannot go back and retroactively, right? Oh, shit, I took Chase 101. The next thing you know, you get the 102, like 8 drafts in a row. Yep. And now you're overweight Chase and underweight Jefferson. Like, it's just little things to take into account when you're drafting tons of teams, like
I think it's a great point.
People are.
Yeah, I love that. But in these time limit tournaments, taking them at the 2-3 turn, it's a snapshot. No one's going to get we're just not going to see like 412 Lamar in any of these puppies, or maybe one really really weird one, but that's not going to be common ADP. But with a stack like Lamar, like if you are really familiar with the way this, and it does require drafting at least somewhat frequently, because these things always kind of are shifting around. We're building houses on sand here, but it's like for right now, that there's a good chance that you can get Bateman and Zay Flowers on the 7-8.
Mm-hmm.
And, you probably can get Odell. I would be kind of pushing Odell, especially if I have both those guys. Even one of those guys, I might push Odell. But if you feel better about Odell than I do, you can get him pretty easily in a range of the draft where there's not a ton of reason to want to take wide receivers generally. It opens up running back picks earlier, right? You can take Dobbins is a guy that I take a lot. That's another, we talk about the running back. I take a lot of Dobbins with Lamar Jackson because he comes back. Not only does Dobbins stack with the Ravens, and I'm just betting on the Ravens to be awesome, the Ravens to return to a couple years ago where it's like they're blowing out teams, kind of an Eagles-like Ravens run this year. Lamar's healthy, under contract, new receivers, new OC, and we're all sitting there like, why were we doubting Lamar? He has the highest upside. He's the one who scored the most points of any of these quarterbacks. He's got weapons. They told us they're going to throw more. He's under contract. He's happy. He's been there for months. Like, he's had a chance to work out with these guys. Blah, 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 blah. I just think the upside cases on this stack are pretty obvious. And I like tacking on the running back. I'll tack on Gus Edwards to this stuff too. But to this point, in the cases where I'm tacking on Dobbins, it's not just that I'm betting on the Ravens, it's that I'm taking a running back in a range of the draft where I don't tend to take a ton of running backs generally. So I'm getting kind of a little bit of different texture to my drafts, taking a running back there. I could also mix in a running back in the late first or the early second if I kind of basically have penciled in maybe Lamar for the third or whatever. It certainly makes things easier for me if I've already done an early running back. That's one detour. Lamar's 2 detours, right? But then I can maybe even get away with a third running back detour because I'm thinking that I can take wide receivers in 7 and 8. So that takes me to my 5th wide receiver through 8 rounds very easily. It's a stacked wide receiver with my quarterback. It's also a rookie, assuming you go Bateman Flowers, a rookie is that wide receiver 5 is kind of interesting because I'm betting on that. I've got depth at the position now, and I'm betting on someone to come on as the season goes on. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to play a wide receiver 5 in general. So just like it's like one of those things where if you know kind of how the Lamar Jackson stack with the receivers tends to go, it's a little different if you do it with Andrews. But with the receivers, what does it unlock in other rounds of the draft? That 7-8 wide receiver double tap unlocks running backs before round 7 a little bit more easily.
It's such a perfect point because I think it's easy for us to, and to a certain extent, everyone does this and everyone should when we say the phrase, like, let the draft come to me. To a certain extent, that's just how a fucking snake draft works, right? You don't get to pick, it's not like it has
to come. You
don't
bid in.
Like
you don't get.
Yeah.
We're on the 202 now, so pipe down.
Right. Exactly. So like technically, yes, everyone is letting the draft come to them. But what I think the difference is that everyone draft, not everyone, most of our opponents draft what I would call front to back, right? I got my first round pick. Okay, I took AJ Brown. Okay, who's up? Who's available in the second round? Look, Eckler fell past ADP. Boom, taking him. Third round. Okay, DK Metcalf's the top guy on the board. Taking him. Whatever. And then like you get to the 8th round and you're like, oh, you're looking at the queue. Oh, okay, now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do that because I drafted those first 4, 5, 6 guys. I like to, of course, you have to do that to a certain extent. Like I said, it's a snake draft. It has to kind of come to you. But I like to think about it how you did, which is more like back to front, right? Like you said, I know where Lamar goes. And then because I know where Lamar goes, like you said, it allows me to not only think about my first 2 picks, it allows me to think about my next several picks thereafter because of what the Ravens offer with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, right? Not every offense is like this. But you mentioned before, which is going to also partially segue into another kind of subject or question I want to ask. But you mentioned like the Rams and the Giants, frankly, both sides of that game is one. That is one I'm being cognizant of like, I don't think my exposure is high enough to that game. And it makes no sense because everyone is free besides Saquon Barkley and Cooper Kupp. And both offenses look pretty good. Both defenses don't look very good. It makes too much sense. And yet I don't have as much exposure to it. So that's one of those things where I'm dictating it. But that's one of the examples of not the same thing as the Ravens, but like I know inherently I can get a Giant or a Ram whenever I want, any position.
Yeah.
Literally any position. You want one of the Giants backup running backs? You want one of the Rams backup running backs? Sure, that's a fucking lottery. You want to talk about
Cam Akers is very affordable,
Akers is affordable. We went from Waller at the 2-3 turn to now Waller in a better situation, probably at least for like volume and upside, now going in the 80s. Daniel Jones, I don't know what that guy's got to do. He just crushed last year, right? and he goes super cheap. But right, I'm not saying we should love Jalen Hyatt, but Jalen Hyatt is won the freaking Biletnikoff and is a spike week type receiver who's now gotten down into the 170s, right? Paris Campbell, Tutu, Van, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's free. But like, if you just go through your draft and you just say, okay, I took this guy in the 3rd round. Now I'm going to take this guy in the 4th round. And you don't say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take Cooper Kupp here. And then I didn't get Saquon. Okay. That informs the fact that now there's Waller. There's all those Giants wide receivers that go literally outside the top 170. There's Daniel Jones. And then on the Ram side, right? There's Akers, there's Stafford, there's Higbee, there's Tutu, there's all this. These are all late round guys. Van, these are all late round guys. So now what does that mean for my second through 7th round picks? That means something different for them. And so I'm planning from the back, right? Because I started, okay, got Cup. Now I think about what does that mean, right? Same thing with the Ravens. What does it mean when I take Lamar here and I say I don't have Andrews? Well, that means I'm going to be looking at Zay and Bateman. So now I got 3 rounds in between here. Right now,
exactly.
What do I do?
And those are more the rounds that I'm focused on because I love Breece Hall. Right, if Breece Hall falls to the 311, I'm taking him, dude. I'm taking him. It doesn't matter if Lamar's there. So I haven't set up. I'm not like so in on Lamar right now that I'm thinking about him. To be honest, in rounds 1 or 2, I'm really not. But as soon as I take him, first of all, it definitely kind of bails me out a little bit if I did go. Let's say I went Bijan or Eckler and then a wide receiver.
Definitely,
I can take Lamar.
Out.
It feels like I feel much better about the start because then I know I'm going to be targeting 3 wide receivers no earlier than like the 7-11, right? So I'm going to be taking some more wide receivers. I only have 1 to that point, so I'm going to be taking a few more wide receivers. But not only do I feel better about my round 1 running back selection, I might throw in another one. In between, because I know I have that flexibility. If I don't have any to that point, I can go, man, I'm going to take 2. I'm going to take a falling value on, someone that I don't normally draft, and that's another thing I've tried to take advantage in those builds is like, I don't really love taking Alexander Madison right now or Dameon Pierce. I don't tend to take a lot of, but if those guys fall, I will if, or whatever. Oh, Aaron Jones is another guy, right? Aaron Jones is one of the guys because he falls. We're talking like late 5th. So if he fall, or maybe I'll throw him around the wrap and try to get him in the early 6th.
Yep.
On some of these Lamar teams, but taking those guys where I'm like, I don't hate Aaron Jones this year. It's just more that I need the wide receiver in that round.
Yeah.
But Lamar
in a vacuum in most drafts, you need that wide receiver there. But because you took Lamar. It's not that you don't need the wide receiver there, but you have a wide receiver that you know is coming. Yeah, you've got one coming.
Yes, and the Giants and the Rams one, I do that one a lot, and partly I do it because I don't like the late. I don't take Eric Gray. I don't take Matt Breida. Maybe that's a leak, but I don't. I don't take Kyron Williams. I don't take Zach Evans. I probably in combination taking.
Gonna start.
I don't take Sony. Yeah, so I'm not really. Not to say that I won't later, but I don't feel like I have clarity on them right now, so I'm just not really taking them.
Yep.
Okay, so what am I taking? Well, I like Hodgins. I like Slayton. I'll take Jalen Hyatt if he falls way past ADP, and he's fallen so much in ADP. I'm starting to get more interested. I'll take Tutu. I'll take Van. There's lots of pieces there that I'm willing to take. They are all wide receivers. So
100%.
That informs what I'm doing, right? If I've got Cooper Kupp and Darren Waller, right, and then I tack on Daniel Jones, I'm now going to push any wide receiver picks. I might go through, into round 14 with only 5 wide receivers. Entering round 15, only 5 wide receivers, because I know I'm tacking on wide receivers late. My late round picks are going to be mostly wide receivers. So why would I box myself out by taking like a Sky Moore in the 10th round? That actually hurts my overall team plan. Like I know those late rounds are going to be easy to take those wide receivers later. And that's where if you do it this way, if you say, okay, not that I know for a fact those wide receivers will be there, but there's a good chance I'm going to be, because there's so many of them, that I'm going to be taking some late round wide receivers on this build. I want to be in a position where I go to the, I'm on the clock, and the guy that I want is sitting right at the top of the queue. The position, the exact player that just fits this team, I want him to be sitting right at the top of the queue. And you achieve that in, this Rams Giants example by passing on a Sky Moore and taking a running back instead. By passing on, a wide receiver in the 12th round, right? I'll grab Jalen Warren here because I'm going to get a running back and fill out my running back and feel really strong. Even if let's say I have 4 running backs to that point. So what? I'll take my 5th running back, get that taken care of. because this is a Giants Rams thing. And I know there's a bunch of wide receivers late. I'm not going to be taking late round flyers so much on running backs. I'm going to be spending them on correlated wide receiver selections.
I love that so much. And it also kind of reminded me, I wanted to look at some of my Cooper Cup teams, and it's funny because I actually don't think no one spends more time thinking through wasting their brain space thinking through stupid galaxy brain best ball ideas than me and all the other sickos listening to this. But I think it was just like partially subconsciously happening, which is funny that we're talking about it now. But with Cooper Cup teams, what's happening a lot for me is this is specifically this example of kind of back to front or knowing what is available to me that makes sense on a Cooper Cup team and drafting it accordingly. So I have these, I'll call them, they're definitely 0 RB builds for other people. For me, like I will sometimes take my 0 RB a little bit more extreme, but I'm hammering the elite wide receivers, right? So I take Cooper Cup and I say, okay, like you said, I know what is available with those wide receivers later. I know that if I need Stafford, if I need Higbee, I got those guys in my back pocket. But I think my personal preference is there's that Waller Daniel Jones kind of combo available to me from, Waller at 85 or whatever, and Daniel Jones at 100, 110, something like that is his ADP. Yeah. And I would love to get that pair because I have this superstar wide receiver that would give me elite quarterback upside, elite tight end upside, right?
And the superstar wide receiver, one of the advantages of superstar wide receiver is that they can basically be a whole offense. Yes. So in some ways, they're like a perfect bring back.
Exactly. And so then when I get this, right, all this that's so perfectly said, and you combine it with this rushing quarterback who we just saw get there last year as a rusher without really popping off to any of his wide receivers. They're fine, but nothing super special. But now this elite tight end, who the reason why the Darren Waller bull case is that he's like the most target dominant tight end in the league because their wide receivers are not very good. Right?
Yeah. Gretsch has been making the bull case that he is their ex wide receiver, basically. That would be pretty sweet.
He was a former wide receiver. He's a converted wide receiver. So what if he is just their wide receiver one, right? That's been like the Pitts bull case. We've been making the Pitts bull case that he's just a wide receiver, right? Who's classified as a tight end. And maybe that's true. But that's the thing for Waller is like, no, this dude's just going to have like a 28% target share, right? And down the field and in the end zone, etc. So now you dominated tight end. You didn't dominate quarterback, but you got basically elite quarterback production, but at pick 105. And you got the whole Rams offense in Cooper Cup, which has actually pretty much been the whole Rams offense for 2 years. So what does that mean now? Well, I know that I'm probably going to be tacking on a giant or a couple giants later, right? Let's say in this instance, because I will look at Saquon in the second round because that's a pretty fun one. You want to talk about two guys who could just be the whole offense in the game. It's those two dudes.
I passed on that once. Got him in the third.
Oh,
that feels good.
Maybe I am going to try that now because the holdout.
Once you get him in the third, I'm like, well, I will never take him in the second again.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll feel nothing if I stack him in a second. I have to only get him in the third.
Is that what it's like? I feel like for you now, like when you enter like the Chihuahua, it's like, I don't know, man, I just won Best Ball Mania 3 and now I'm going to draft a 25 max $4 tournament, 25 teams in 2 days.
I wish it was more like that. I got 7 Chihuahuas in and then I was like, I got to get this article done, which I did get done. And it's currently in the hopper to go out Monday morning. Yeah, I didn't max enter the Chihuahua, but I got in 7 still. So I'm not quite there.
I have not slept a lot over the course of the last couple of days, and I'm blaming the Chihuahua because I did get it in, but there hasn't been a whole lot of sleep over the last 48 hours. So thank you, Underdog. It was a very fun contest.
I love it as a contest, a small contest like that, fast drafts only.
Fast drafts only 25 max per, 25 per person. So like, us sickos can't just like take over the whole tournament, right? With a bunch of people drafting 150.
Yeah. It makes it's $4. It's even smaller. It's flat payout structure. Like it's just natural that like they should create tournaments that make people question that are high entry drafters, like, is this really worth my time? Because that way, like, there's that way I'm not max entering it, right?
Yes.
And a bunch of other sickos aren't max entering it, which is probably good for the ecosystem.
Definitely. So anyway, just to wrap this Cooper Cup kind of Giants thing, because then I do want to. That one's a good segue to what we've started calling oh shit stacks here at Spike Week, which these two of these offenses could be considered that. But so Cooper Cup, right? Take Cooper Cup for this example. Saquon's not a thing. Or I tried to push Saquon to the third because Kareem told me it's possible, and then it didn't work. So I don't have Saquon. I know.
I'll show you the team. It's real.
I know that I'm gonna be right. I know that players that make sense for this team, where they go later, and it's Waller in the 80s, Daniel Jones in the early 100s, and then nothing but late round guys. Literally, all late round Cam Akers, but let's throw him out for this example. So I know, like, for those from round 2 to Waller, like, I kind of have this freedom. And so then I take this step back and I say, okay, well, I know I want to be able to, like, set up another stack, right, with another quarterback. I know that maybe a second round running back or that third, right, that tier of Pollard, Chubb, Ramondre, so one of those guys could make sense. But I also know that I'm going to run into this zone of the draft after Daniel Jones, right? So, like, maybe before Waller or sometime around Waller and after Daniel Jones, or maybe even there's a guy in between those two where, like, there's no wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the juju zone, right? Between Waller and Daniel Jones, and thereafter is like the juju zone, Odell, Zay Flower, or Zay Jones, Jacoby Myers. So, like, okay, there I'm probably going to be taking running backs, but at the end, I'm going to be taking these Giants and Rams wide receivers. So it's like, then it's like almost starts filling out your lineup for you because you know what you're going to try to do. Like, literally, all you did was take Cooper Cup, and you didn't take Saquon. And now, like, okay, well, 85 is Waller, 100 is Daniel Jones, and then my last 2 picks are these wide receivers. And then you say, okay, well, where do the running backs, where are they the best picks? Like, oh, okay, well, then let's drop Damian Harrison the 10th round, right? And Kendre Miller in the 11th round. And, like, I just start dropping these guys into the team, and you're like, oh, it just, like, makes itself out. You're like, okay, I'll take a detour for a running back. Okay, Dobbins, right? I got 3 wide receivers. Let's take Dobbins here. Like, oh, okay, I took Amari in the 3rd round. I'll take Watson as my other guy, right? Maybe Brees was a detour, and I somehow got Amari. Like, oh, okay, got that. Let's throw this will be a Watson and a Daniel Jones team, right? It's just like it all just, like, falls together for you from a stacking perspective when you, like, know what those games and those teams, and right, the Giants are such a good one because it's like, you want a Giant stack, dude, take it whenever the hell you want. But knowing that, right, like, the Eagles are the opposite end. You want the Eagles 1st, 2nd, 3rd round. Like, you have to know that too. So, like, I just thought it was interesting, like, because the Rams Giants ones, it like starts to make your draft for you when you've made, like, 2 selections.
Yeah, and I would say, so the Rams Giants one, okay. What I like to do there is I continue correlating as I go through. You have this big range of the draft before you get to Waller, right? And you just keep correlating because Waller just got sniped. So this whole plan that you had is no longer actionable.
100%.
What do you do now? Well, I took Terry McLaurin in the 4th, and then I took Brandon Ayuk in the 5th. So right there, I can go, all right, I can push that. That can be Purdy. You know, I've got that as a setup. And that's already, stack, bring back, if Kittle comes, you would already get sniped on Waller, so you wouldn't have taken Kittle, but you can grab Elijah Mitchell later on as one of your running backs, break a tie to that, continue betting on the 49ers that way. There aren't a ton of, like, other, I'm not tacking on Juwan Jennings or anything, but if I've got Ayuk, Elijah Mitchell, Purdy, I feel pretty good about that. If I didn't get Elijah Mitchell and I end up with Brian Robinson, right, and I'm a different human being, maybe I take Sam Howell, But I actually have taken Sam Howell occasionally, and that would be one of those ways. Is I set up a Purdy thing, Purdy gets he's moving up a bit. He gets sniped. And I'm like, I really do need the other quarterback here. I'll grab Howell, whatever. I already had it set up for this game. So hopefully Howell's out there and doing stuff. But if you, and it doesn't have to be that game, obviously, but you're just kind of like correlating things as you go within this window of flexibility that you talked about with this particular stack, because that protects you from snipes. That is like, if that original plan, you're not so locked in on that original plan. You've got it in the back of your mind as a possibility.
It's your plan, but you have endless fallback options.
You create those fallback options as you go by continuing to build in correlation, adding, I was talking about week 17 correlation with the McLaurin and Ayuk thing, but if you take Tyler Lockett, if you're on the other side of the board and you take Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba, you've set yourself up for a Geno thing as a potential fallback, or just as a quarterback too. But just to be able to get a double stacked quarterback too, if one of your stacks gets blown up, it's like, oh no, like I have another bet on an offense without the quarterback, because that whatever stack you had set up that doesn't go through, you still have. It's just without the quarterback. Then you have a double stacked Geno, right? And then you figure out a way to get an additional third stacked quarterback or third stacked team, your second stacked quarterback on the roster. And at that point, it's a stronger team than it would have been. This is the kind of the point that I was making in my article about, not worrying if someone snipes your quarterback so much. It obviously is a problem if you end up with like a jumble of random assorted players. Like the chances that those particular guys end up being exactly the right guys is pretty low. You want to put yourself in a position to get fewer things right? Benefit on being right on just a few offenses, take advantage of correlation. But if that's something you want to do, why wouldn't you want to do it more? Why wouldn't you want to do it without having drafted a third quarterback, betting on teams without the quarterback, taking a wide receiver and a running back? This is something I'm looking into. This is after these articles go out on running back success rate, which is the next stuff I'll have out on site. I'm going to be looking into wide receiver one and running back stacks. So I think those are pretty interesting. Yeah. And that's it's a way of capturing an offense, right? Here's another, I'm just going to capture this. This offense is good. That's the bet. This offense is good. And you could do that, right? I take a lot of Ridley, Travis Etienne.
Interesting.
If I get like that, right? If I get Trevor Lawrence, it's because he fell. So now I've got that, and like I'm talking late 7th Trevor Lawrence. I feel good about late 7th Trevor Lawrence, even though I don't draft much Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
But if I don't get Trevor Lawrence, so what? I've got the running back and the wide receiver one on the Jaguars. I mean, if the Jaguars are good, I'm putting up points. So that's another way I try to think through. That's not week 17 correlation. That's just a stack, just a bet. Jaguars. And then if the quarterback falls in your lap, great.
And I think everybody thinks about what you're talking about here and what we're talking about through this lens of week 17, because it's become so popular. And I mean, we've recorded here conversations about how to use it and how to correlate in week 17, I drafted, let's say I drafted Keenan Allen, and then Jerry Jeudy or I get to that wide receiver. I drafted Keenan Allen. I get to this dead zone. Cortland Sutton's the best wide receiver. I need a wide receiver. Okay, I choose him because he correlates. That's fine. There's nothing else to say about that. But I think people have now almost put this idea of week 17 sometimes ahead of what we're talking about here. And it's not, you can do both. You can have your cake, and this is one of those where you can have your cake and eat it too. And the sniping thing is such a good point, because a lot of the times people will just go through and draft their favorite player or draft a guy that's at the top of the ADP list or whatever. And then that snipe tends to hurt because you set up one thing, and when it doesn't go according to plan, that whole team is fucked. As opposed to you navigate your way through this draft, and like you said, okay, I got Kupp. Now I'm set up for the Rams. Second round, Garrett Wilson. Okay, now I'm set up for the Jets, right? Okay, now I'm going to take my detour. Now I'm going to, yeah, exactly. Garrett Wilson fell for the first time, literally in 2023 fantasy football. Uh, whoever in the third round, right? Then you get the you take McLaurin as your fourth round pick, and then like you said, okay, well I get to the seventh round instead of just taking, right? I don't have anybody, instead of just taking Gabe. I like Gabe again this year too. Instead of just taking Gabe because he's my favorite seventh rounder, well, I don't have a quarterback yet. Let's give myself outs to this Washington thing, right? So I'm just going to take Dotson on this one, right? So now, like, I've drafted this whole way to be like kind of like, he's like, go ahead and snipe me or whatever it was that like, please snipe me. It's like, I didn't say,
I considered calling it please snipe me, and then I was like, it's May, dude. You don't want to have the worst summer of your life. Don't title an article, please snipe me.
Because people will do it, especially because when you won last year, people go, oh, I see Daily Rojo in here, and he literally said to snipe me, so I'm going to piss away my $25 to make him miserable.
Yeah, don't do that.
But that's the stacking. You said it earlier with Week 17 does this, and just general offense stacking does this. It not only like gets you maybe onto some guy, whether it's spreading out your exposure or getting guys on the teams that they should be drafted on, like the Kincaid thing. It's not even necessarily evening out exposures, but it's like, I'm just going to have Kincaid. So like on those 5 Kincaid teams, if it hits, those teams are winning a lot of money.
Yeah.
This allows you to like be a good drafter and never get sniped and never, not never get sniped, never worry about being sniped. Never worry about you get to the end of the draft like, well, fuck, I don't have any stacks. I took an unstacked Desmond Ridder and an unstacked, Mac Jones or whatever. Because when you're siding with stacking and mapping things out along as you go, you can like never create a bad team. It may not be the team you wanted or the team you intended to draft like at the beginning, but you're like, so whether it's a Howell team or a Daniel Jones team or a Purdy team or a Ridder team or a Stafford team or, whatever. It didn't matter because you were set for everything along the way. It just kind of depended upon what what did the room give you? But you kind of took it first. You took it from the room and then you let them give you amongst 5 or 6 different options.
That's exactly. I love that. And for example, you could go Ridley Etienne and then 5-6. You could go Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, right? And then it's like, all right, room, are you going to give me 7th round Trevor Lawrence? If not, I can very easily get Geno with this stack. I get 10th round Geno if I feel like I want to like reach a little bit there. But, I've done that because once you have that kind of double stack locked up, I don't mind a little bit of a reach for Geno there. Can you pull up this team? This is a Best Ball Mania team that I drafted recently. I'll read it out for the audio listeners as well. But so I'm out of the 11 hole here. I went AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, and then Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne. So this is why I brought this team up, did this exact thing. Then I grabbed Michael Pittman, which correlates with Devontae Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then I got Deontay Johnson. Just, I think a pretty good pick there.
Also, you have outs to Steelers.
I have outs to Steelers.
Pickett is later. I'm trying to see if Lockett is already off the board or
Lockett
he probably
was not off the board. I could have gone Lockett, but I felt like I've taken a lot of Lockett, and I was like, I'll just take Deontay. And I have the Steelers out. I also have here the Adams Michael Pittman mini correlation, which gives me Anthony Richardson. Then round 7 and 8. This is the big thing. Round 7, Trevor Lawrence makes it all the way back. But I take a look at the round 12 team. I wrote about this on Legendary Upside called Dictating the Turns, where I kind of trying to force that extra little value out of the room. Yep. This guy has Deshaun Watson. He can hurt me, but also probably hurt himself by taking unstacked Trevor Lawrence. Doesn't really make any sense for his team. So I went ahead and took Dallas Goedert, who's a really nice value at 7-11 and correlates with AJ Brown. Mm-hmm. 2 Eagles, right? So then I push Trevor Lawrence around the corner, a little bit of a heart in the throat moment, but I get him at 802. I don't draft a lot of Trevor Lawrence, but I love him at 802.
That's got to be one of the deepest the furthest falls for I know he falls here and there, but 86 is a big fall.
Yeah, this was a fun one. So then Zach Charbonnet, who I take a ton of in the late ninth, but he correlates with
Deontay.
my Steelers bet. And then I take Pat Freiermuth. So now I've set up, I got my bring back. Seahawks are running all over the Steelers. Steelers have to throw to catch up, which seems like the most realistic way in which they would throw a lot in week 17. So I kind of like that. Grab Zay Jones at the 11-11. It's stacked with Lawrence. This guy at this point starts scooping up every available running back. So I end up reaching a lot on Roschon Johnson, grab Devin Singletary, which takes me to 4 running backs at that point. I have Travis Etienne, Zach Charbonnet, Roschon Johnson, Devin Singletary. So get that 4th running back through the end of the 13th, which feels pretty solid. That's generally like a mark I try to hit if possible. I won't force it, but that's like a nice little checkpoint. And then Kenny Pickett, round 14. So
beautiful.
Then I tacked on Leonard Fournette. I tacked on some cheap pieces on this Colts Raiders things that I built out. So I didn't get Anthony Richardson, but I still took Hunter Renfrow, Michael Mayer, Josh Downs.
Love it.
Just bet on Raiders. Raiders are better than people think. Colts can pass a little bit. And the whole team is I bet I've got a thing on the Eagles. I've got Steelers bring back. I didn't get a bring back actually on the Trevor Lawrence one. But I didn't. I just figured I'm not forcing that, right? I'm not taking Terrace Marshall here. I can take Michael Mayer with my very last pick, who I think is like a much stronger bet than the 1802. So that's one thing where I didn't go with the correlation, but I did, didn't I? Because I had already. It's my 3rd Raider, and I've got 2 Colts coming back. So to me, I'm not really even sacrificing like a bring back necessarily. Technically, I am on my quarterback. The game I would like to go off the most is that Jaguars game, but I also have ETN. So what if it's ETN who you need in week 17? I've got a couple other games stacked up. That's just kind of the way I think about this stuff.
So 2 things that jumped out to me here is A, fuck you. That team is awesome. And you executed it. You executed it really well. But what really jumped out, like with the Jags thing, and you'll see this all the time, is so we know inherently that like ADP value is important. I absolutely hate when someone calls me and my AirPods pick up like my cell phone during the conversation. It all fucks everything up. But that just happened. So regaining my train of thought, when you do things like you did with Calvin Ridley and Travis Etienne, a lot of the times it works the best with like the wide receivers, but you can create, right? It's like the leverage thing, manufactured or, dropped in your lap. You can create your own ADP value like you did with Trevor Lawrence sometimes.
Yeah.
Another perk of these stacks is that you don't guarantee it, because sometimes, like you said, okay, I'm just going to reach for Gene. Right. I took JSN and Lockett. And when you're at the turn, things can be different too, because you don't you're not afforded the ability to just pick off value like you are if you're drafting in, at the 5 or the 6 or something like that. So there's nuance. But like the Lawrence thing is such a good example. Only one guy had Christian Kirk. You had Ridley and ETN. No one else is incentivized to take Trevor Lawrence. And if you're in a room where everybody's kind of staying in their own lane, you can create this ADP value, right? You can create 2 rounds of fucking 80, which is what you did. Create like 2 rounds of ADP value on Trevor Lawrence by taking those skill guys. If you don't get it, you don't get it. You still have that bet. You just walked through all the different things you set up, right? I literally have not drafted Jimmy Garoppolo once, but if someone wanted to say, look, you're set for Jimmy Garoppolo, you're set for Anthony Richardson, you were set for Kenny Pickett, right? You set yourself up for all these different things. So if the Lawrence thing didn't happen, it didn't happen. But the only way to find out, the only way for it to happen is to do what you did. And every once in a while, it's going to happen. It's like the leverage thing. You manufactured that ADP value. And if you do this over and over and over in every draft, you're almost guaranteeing, right? You were basically guaranteed that, like, who the fuck is taking all of the quarterbacks that I've like right. Everyone would be taking, like, you don't necessarily know which one it's going to be. In this case, it was Lawrence. Next draft, it might be Anthony Richardson. The next time it's going to be Kenny Pickett, because you took both. Maybe you took Deontay Pickens and Freiermuth, right? So when everybody else is picking their late round guy, why the fuck would anybody else take Kenny Pickett? They don't have any Steelers on their team. They're going to take Stroud or Bryce Young or whatever. So like you can create these things. So it's not just like, you're not just evening out exposure. You're not just breaking ties and all that. You are doing those things, but you're also just by stacking, creating these leverage spots and ADP these things that we know are good. It has all these downstream effects to it.
Yeah, and I didn't push Trevor Lawrence to the 802 just to like get cute and get to show this team on a stream, although it certainly is a perk. The Dallas Goedert is sitting there at 7-11, and the team at the 12 hole did not have a tight end. Dallas Goedert's a huge value, I think, at 7-11. Again, I did have AJ Brown, so it's a continued bet on the Eagles. I'm not going to go back and get Hurts, but like, you got to pay up for Hurts, right? I can get Hurts' weapons and get there if I can fill in the quarterback at a much, much cheaper price. This is like one of those DFS things, right? If I can pay, $5,000 for my quarterback, instead of $8,000 or whatever, then I'm in a position where I don't score as many points.
That's going to be Sam Howell in week 1.
Hey, I'll play Sam Howell in DFS. I will play Sam Howell in DFS.
I can script the Sunday morning show on Roto-Grinders that I will be doing to people as if they haven't heard. Yeah, let's just go ahead and record this. I actually don't know who shocker. I don't know week 1 schedule.
Rotopat was so tilted this time last year. Rotopat was like, wait, you don't know the week 1 schedule? I was like, no. And by the way, it wasn't this time last year. It was like late August. He was like, you don't know the week 1 schedule?
They play in 3 weeks and you don't know who plays in week 1, but I could my sleep I fucking recite the week 17 schedule.
He was legitimately irritated. He was like, what has happened to your brain?
Oh my god, they play the Cardinals. It is Sam Howell to Jahan Dotson season in week 1. Anyway,
well, he's not getting benched in that game. All right. I just kind of want to point out that, like, okay, let's say the guy at the 7 hole needed a quarterback and already had a tight end. I would have flipped that. I would have said what has a better chance of getting back. I would have taken Lawrence. Lawrence obviously a huge value too. So you can manufacture these little extra ADP squeezes around the turns, but what are you getting for it? If it was like he already has a quarterback, but I don't really care what other player I get on this turn, I would take Lawrence. Like, I don't think you want to just push it for the sake of pushing it. But in this case, I'm sitting at a huge value correlated Dallas Goedert, don't have a tight end yet. I want to try to get both.
I agree. And it's such a good point because I do think people say, well, I can, he has a quarterback. I don't need to take him here. But you're just deciding between 2 wide receivers that you don't really give a shit. Well, just take him. Yeah. Just take him then. It's like the Geno thing before. It's like, a little bit ahead of ADP, but like he makes the most sense here. There's nobody else I want. Right. That's what happens to me there. Again, those pockets of the draft exist too. Right. That's why nothing is ever done in a silo, done in a vacuum. It's like you're constantly who's on the board, what pocket of the draft I'm in, what do my opponents have, right? What do I need to be thinking about down the road? Right? All these different things have to play in. That's actually why we've spent on these Bulldog videos that we've done. They're slow. The Bulldogs are slow drafts. I forget which, if it was round 3 and 4 or 5 and 6 or something like that, so 2 picks, right? If you're in a fast draft, that's a 1 minute total that you have maximum to make those 2 picks when you're on the clock. We spent an hour and a half debating who to take between 4 people. But that's, when you think about it, like the fast draft is kind of crazy because our brain is trying to process, what you just did in that draft. You just processed like 20 different things that we've mostly talked about on this show, all in once in the blink of an eye. All that stuff is what we discussed for a fucking hour and a half to figure out who to pick on a show. But we're having to do it within 20 to 25 seconds because you have to make the pick too. You have to figure out these things in 20 seconds when you're on the clock. And so it is kind of crazy to think about it. I'm not going to say to wrap because we got made fun of a lot, and I got made fun of a lot a few episodes.
Actually, do have an out, so we need to wrap.
We actually are going to wrap. I promise. I just want to talk about, like I said, what we call kind of like oh shit stacks, being, so we just talked about how to not get yourself into these situations, but sometimes it happens. Things don't play out your way. You tried to set up 3, 4, 5 different stacks and it just didn't work, right? You got sniped, or maybe you decided when you got to the 12th round, when you were going to take Derek Carr, somebody else was on the board, somebody else there fell, and you were like, well, I can't pass on this guy in the 12th round. Now you got to the 15th round and you don't have stacks built out. How often will you prioritize, right? Like, so Mac Jones, Hunter Henry, Devontae Parker, Tyquan Thornton, those kinds of guys are like readily available back there. If you like how, like me, Curtis Samuel, as you mentioned, is available back there. Logan Thomas is back there. Jordan Love, if he falls or whatever, you have Musgrave and Jaden Reed and those guys back there. There's a bunch of these ways to still build these stacks in.
CJ Stroud, I think, is a really
Stroud
good
Stroud is a good one. Bryce Young has Hayden Hurst back there, and I guess
you can take Mingo too. I don't mind where Mingo goes. So you take him, and
But how? I'm trying to think about how to phrase this, because I think these are like a necessity for any drafter to have in their back pocket and make sure to go to. But like, how often are these things happening in your drafts? And like, are you like trying to avoid them? Are you, we are talking about the like plan ahead type thing in our draft. We know we have a Mac Jones stack always in our back pocket, but then the next thing you know, if you don't, like if you lean on that crutch too much, the next thing you know, you're like massively overweight a Mac Jones, Hunter Henry stack, which I'm not saying that whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but that may not have been your intention. Right? On May 1st, when you started drafting BBM, you probably didn't say, oh yeah, load me up all the Mac Jones and Hunter Henry. But then when the contest closes, because you've had to backdoor into this so much, you end up way overweight on that. Like, how do you think about some of these things? And is that something that you run into frequently with these backdoor stacks?
The way I think about it, generally, I don't want to be doing a lot of that, to the point where I actually like Mac Jones, and I just realized I'm underweight on him now, because I don't like to put myself in that situation. But Mac Jones, if I'm going to play that game, I would prefer to play it with Allen as my quarterback. And then, but I probably need to take more Mac Jones, actually. But I would like to, maybe take Hopkins or have Gabe, already, like, have built out a Bills thing that didn't happen and then tack a Mac Jones stack onto that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm going to do the Stroud one, I'd rather have Burks if possible, at least give me a bring back. I'd rather have Derrick Henry. I'd rather have Dameon Pierce and at least just have like a premium piece of like this offense is going to be better than people expect. Well, the starting running back would benefit from that a lot. So to the extent that is possible, with the Jaguar stuff, like the Jaguars one that I outlined earlier, what if Lawrence didn't come back? Well, I probably prioritize Mingo a little bit more and see if I can play that as a Bryce Young thing.
I like it.
And maybe instead of Pickett, it's a Bryce Young thing. And, I figure, maybe I reach on Richardson in the 8th a little bit, whatever. There's a million ways to do it. But the point is, when I'm doing these backdoor stacks, I would prefer to have already set up a bring back on them or a premium piece on it to the extent that's possible. And the way that I don't have to fall back on them more than I want is that I'm doing minis throughout the draft, or I'm building, consecutive, I'm building little double stacks at various points throughout the draft. That Freiermuth pick to go with Deontay Johnson, right? I'm like, all right, sick. I already have a double stack. But the way I think about it, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, and Zach Charbonnet is a fun little 3-piece stack. Do I have to have Kenny Pickett on that? No, I do not. I absolutely don't care if I have Kenny Pickett if the team is already set at quarterback. That's how I'm kind of thinking through. Like, these little things go together. These little things go together. And then if I need to tackle on the quarterback, or it falls in such a way that it's really nice to do, amazing. If I need to, find another quarterback, hopefully I've already set myself up for one.
And that, again, is like one of these downstream benefits of doing these stacks is what two things. One, the least important part of your stack is that quarterback. So it allows you this flexibility to just drop that least important piece in depending upon what this draft gives you, right? Like I said earlier, you took the stacks away from the rest of your opponents, and then you kind of just laid it on the table and let them hand you the last piece, the least important piece, right? You put the whole puzzle together and they gave you that last piece. It also, these oh shit stacks, right? These late backdoor stacks make you feel better about yourself, right? Like I definitely have too much of the Mac Jones, Hunter Henry, because I do like to push things and shit happens in drafts. The problem is that in practice, those are not the things that are really going to win you best ball tournaments. But a late stack with some premium options, as you mentioned, mixed in, and that's why building out these stacks, even without the quarterback, are so impactful, is because, like you said, look, is Mac Jones going to score 40 points with 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns going to Hunter Henry in any given week? No, you're just getting them because, look, I need a quarterback. I need a late round tight end. They're good values, whatever. But if you build for the case in which they really do blow up in a given week, it's going to include, right, like you said, Treylon Burks. The way in which that Houston-Tennessee game blows up is not CJ Stroud to Robert Woods with Kyle Phillips as the bring back. Like, that's not winning you Best Ball Mania 4. I'm just sorry if you've drafted that.
I haven't done the Phillips part.
I'm not trying to be not trying to be a hater. I got plenty of my own shitty backdoor stats.
No, you're right.
But Stroud, Robert Woods, Kyle Phillips, but like we'll do it because we're like, I'm breaking ties with this, right? And it's like, I'm not even saying don't ever do that, but I'm saying if you really want to like gain the juice around some of these backdoor stacks, I think it has to do with thinking about this stacking and correlation as you go throughout the draft, right? Like the real juice is that CJ Stroud has maybe Nico, and then you have Robert Woods, and you had Treylon Burks on that team. Maybe you drafted Chig. Because you drafted Treylon, you take Chig as your tight end. Next thing you know, it's like, okay, now this game has some fucking juice. Now we got juice. I can win this whole thing. Like Kyle Phillips as your only Titan or whatever, as a bring back to Robert Woods, is really just like making you feel better about the team, but it's not really gaining you much win equity.
I agree. And you think about, okay, everyone has these backdoor Stroud stacks, these backdoor Jones stacks. But if you have the confidence and the courage to actually stack up that game like for real, which no one wants to do that. That's why they're sitting there as, I can tack that on because I didn't think about this until now and no one wants them and I'll just tack them on. But if you're like, no, this game's going off. I'm betting on it to be like really high scoring. Like if it does go off, if that Mac Jones team actually does have some juice, like you have the premium pieces. You've got the Bills coming back on it. You know, you took the Hopkins before he signed there and, whatever. But God forbid you include Juju, I mean, if you're going to take Juju, it would be nice to have it correlated with some Bills. You get Mac later. I don't really see how Juju crushes me, but that would be how, right? Like it would be in a week 17 unpredictable shootout where the Bills go off. They have to throw a ton. Juju catches 11 balls for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's the guy you need.
Exactly. So we do got to get out of here. There will be plenty more stacking conversation over the course of the summer. It is clearly an important subject, but a nuanced one. I'm sure it will come up on future shows. And I like your idea that you mentioned before. Maybe that's what we'll talk about next week with kind of, you have a plan of attack for exposure, but like, it's a snake draft. You don't just get to pick, it's not DFS. I don't get to create 150 lineups exactly how I want them to be. I have to do it with the draft. So be on the lookout for that. Next week, of course, I fucked up and did not read kind of our promotion at the very top. So for the sickos that are still hanging around 2 hours in, if you are a legendary upside subscriber, you get 40% off of a Spike Week subscription. So part of why we're doing the show, we have a little bit of a partnership. The people who are reading Legendary Upside are clearly, deep into the fantasy football and probably best ball space. And Spike Week, we offer really some of the only tools in all of best ball and for the people that are taking this pretty seriously. And so You get 40% off. Use promo code LEGUP when you sign up on Spike Week, and you'll automatically get 40% off as long as you stay subscribed to both Legendary Upside and Spike Week. Anything else before we get out of here? I know you got to go. We both got to go.
I'll just say legendaryupside.com/early. You can still get $30 off your first year. There's less than a month to go on that promotion. So if you're considering signing up, good time to sign up. And then that's how you get the 40% off Spike Week as well.
That is perfect. Thank you guys for all of the kind wishes. I did just want to close with, and we took a little couple week hiatus, and I got tons of messages and tons of pings in Discord and tons of, hey, where the hell is Legendary Sickos? You know, it's been a part of my weekly routine now. So I appreciate all the amazing feedback and comments and everything. You can find it both on the Spike Week YouTube channel and the Legendary Upside YouTube channel. We post it on both and podcast feeds everywhere you get your audio, video, everything for Legendary Upside and Spike Week. For myself and for Pat, and I can't believe all of both your dog and my dogs stayed quiet during this.
He was jumping up on the couch. He was. I don't know if you saw my arm going like this. He needed a lot of attention earlier. I was giving him a lot of pets. Jumping on my arm at one point.
It was funny watching him look out the window, but he still stayed mostly quiet. And
yeah, he's good.
I'm also mine didn't even come in the room, so I'm kind of partially terrified about what they've been doing for the last 2 hours. So
at one point, he banged in the cage because he was getting on my arm. I'm going like, the cage is all shaking.
But for me and for Pat and for all these crazy four-legged fur babies, we will see you guys next week.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there, you can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.